We're going to have a little chat. I want to actually take a moment and acknowledge the Magic Twitter Fairy is actually our content coordinator, Deb Schrimmer, who's been doing a fantastic job of getting all your questions to the panel. So as this is the last one, thank you, Deb. So let's start. You've mentioned a lot of interesting practices that you're all employing within government, and I know they aren't always easy to get started. Curious if anyone would like to confess to any workarounds, subterfuges, subversions that might have happened?
Other than the JFDI. Yeah.
Yes.
No one wants to admit to any.
So, building a website is kind of like an omelet. No, I can't really start with that metaphor, but yeah, we've had a lot of we've learned a lot of lessons along the way. We've had some workarounds, but we've also learned that maybe, I mean, we talk a lot about data-driven decision making, and that's really, it's a really valuable thing. But the other side of the coin is that in a city there is also a political reality, and for us, I'm having that lesson hammered into my head presently. When we started with the website, we gave special attention to a number of groups based on the traffic from the initial, from the analytics from our old site. And those groups were airport, transit, HR, and I need to know the other one.
Another group.
Parks. So we got a lot of attention there, and so that's where we focused our initial attention on building subdomains in our website. But if anybody here works in a city, you know that there are people who dress in suspenders and people who wear blue outfits who are rather important. Yeah, police and fire didn't get the special attention right off the bat. So that was an oversight on our part that we are now working to rectify as quickly as possible. And that's the benefit of launching a beta site and you know, keeping our administration informed that we're going to iterate as time goes on. So that was, we quickly moved to rectify that situation.
To rectify that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and I think the notion of iteration helps keep the risk down so that you can get teams of people and you can try to start solving a problem and put something out. And we recently got, and what I would say in my years in government is that the best decisions are the ones that are collaborative, where you get people from multidisciplinary approaches and different views and different levels of the organization together to solve problems. So we recently got a team together to look at parking, like all the parking enforcement and parking payment and parking ticket fighting. I think there's some legal term for that. And they all spent about 3 months really looking at how do they make their content around parking better. And then when Sid and Francis and the CFA team came on board, we said, let's test that. So they gave it their best shot, and then we did some user testing and found that, well, even the best shot still needed a lot of tweaking and improvements. But the process of working together broke down some of the barriers. It really engaged people's creativity and their possibilities for what could work. And it became, what I'm finding is that this process is very energizing. And I have to quote my dear colleague, Karen Jan, I don't know if she's in the audience today, but she talks about like liberating the entrepreneurial bureaucrat. And that's what we want to do, is re-engage creativity in the government.
And should we talk about exactly what we did and what you needed to do to arrange that? So we did the simplest possible usability study you could do. We brought in 3 actual Oakland residents who'd had an interaction with the parking system in one way or another in the last couple of months. We talked to each of them for half an hour. I sat in a room with them, and we had a video camera that broadcast to pretty much the entire parking team. We got 12 people in, and in some ways getting that buy-in, I think, was your work, to come and actually see this happen. How did you do it?
Well, first, they're working together.
They
were inspired to collaborate. And what I worried about a little bit was whether they'd feel defensive, like, well, this was our best shot, and if it's not good enough, they would feel discouraged. And so what I found, and my colleague Mai Ling likes to ply people with chocolate to help ease that process. What I found is that they're excited, and they're beginning to push back on, let's iterate, let's try it. It's not the end of the world if it's not right, because they don't get in trouble, nobody yells at them, right? They get chocolate.
Yeah. I wanted to ask a question about your presentation, Jess, because I think that some of the practices you mentioned, co-design sessions, things like that, are ways to tie together some of the really important impetuses that were uncovered in the inclusiveness session, not uncovered for the first time, obviously, but that are part of our mission as civic designers, and also the practices that come from kind of industrial design. So I'm curious, did you do those with public servants? Did you do those with residents? How did you get it done?
It's depended on the project. So we try to do co-design on most of the work that we do now.
Yeah. And maybe a quick definition of exactly what that is.
I mean, and maybe it's a point of the panel, designing for people and with people. So for most of my career, I've designed for people. And I feel very important because I'm an expert and I'm coming up with cool ideas. And look how awesome I am, right? Because you feel good. You come up with the thing, and I'm going to design it for you. And you're going to be so thankful because of my expertise. And yet, as I've matured a little bit, I've realized that I get to much more powerful solutions and much better buy-in when I involve other people in generating those ideas and moving forward. And so some cases, like for the services card, that was different departments within government, so a cross-section of civil servants who might be implementing the services card features in the future to explore different possible service futures. For the domestic violence policy project that I mentioned, we actually had community groups and members of the police and lawyers and the Canadian version of a district attorney, as well as members of the department who came together to say, what could we be doing better in this case?
Great. Jay, I have a question for you from Twitter, from Nikki Varani of Houston. How did you get buy-in to do a beta instead of a hard launch?
We presented the idea from the very beginning. We presented it to the mayor and his executive team. We brought in the vendor who explained their vision really well, and we supported it. And really, it took us being confident that that was the right way to go, that was the modern model, that it wasn't, we weren't going to try to create something and then deliver it as a whole package and finished, done, forever. We promised that way was we were guaranteed to fail that way. And with, our website had over 7,000 pages. So establishing that we were going to turn up the volume on one and turn down the volume on the old site, that was, the story played really well. The administration accepted it, and that's how we, and then we moved forward. We got this much of a nod, and we just ran with it. Yeah.
So I have a great question from Jesse Baroshak. I hope I'm saying that right. We're seeing these amazing projects. Can you say how long it took for each of these for a reality check and expectation management? How much time was spent on that sort of activity?
Ooh. Dare we talk about how
Nobody
long
wants to fess up again.
contracts?
We're among friends.
I can talk about how long we take. So it depends on the project, of course. Services card, so we're creating a digital identity assurance with physical thing, has been about a 5-year project, and it's ongoing because you renew your driver's license, and that's the core time that you come on board. So it won't actually finish till 2018 for that initial onboarding. But the design work that we did it in 2 major stages. We did field work before the card launched to inform that launch and how it should work. And that project took about 3 months. And then later, we did a bunch more field research to explore different kinds of service options, and then doing that co-design and the consultation. That ran from sort of late spring into early fall for the conceptual work, and then the consultation ran through last fall, and then there was lots of analysis and response this spring. So that's how long that took. But our field projects are usually 2 to 4 months.
Great.
On the DFD side, our initial part is about 3 months long. It's mostly the research aspects, which we mentioned, and sort of digging through the data. And then we're looking at a much longer process to help Oakland with their finding local vendors to actually do the work, and that's probably more like a 12 to 18 month process. And then it's still not done, right? I mean, that's part of it.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I was thinking when Jay was talking about this notion of continuous improvement and there's no finish line, is in a way a workaround this notion of there's a scope of work and you deliver it and you're done, and then anything extra is out of scope and extra money, and then that just sets up a dynamic of if it's not good enough, there's confrontation, and it's never good enough. So it sort of engages feedback and ongoing opportunities for people to make things better. That's where I think we are looking for the roadmap of if we're going to invest, where and how much and how many people. Is it in-house people, or should we have a passel of contracts that we engage? But it kind of it changes the model from it's done and you react to it and everything else is more money.
So here's an interesting one. This is from Matt Cloyd. He's saying, we design web interfaces to simplify complex forms. How can we then simplify the forms and policies themselves, and is that worthwhile? Is that something that design should work on?
Yeah, I mean, if we take this as more of a service design process, then that is part of that process. Often the poor interfaces have become that way because of slightly broken policy. I think the voter registration stuff, voting ballot stuff, is indicative of this, where the fonts have been dictated on a state level, which is why the voting ballot is unusable. So going back to the policy level to fix things like that seems completely sane to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think that often, once something has been online for a while, you can start to see what part of the way it was an artifact of how it was done before and isn't actually necessary.
Yeah.
And because you can iterate quickly, that is the strength of the digitals. You can sometimes take that back. And as the CalFresh and So Clean project that was talked about earlier, you say, wait, we only need 3 fields on this form for the web form. I imagine eventually there will be a conversation about how many of them do we need in the other form.
Exactly, yeah. Things creep in because other stakeholders want to get their fingers in the pie and say, well, I also want to know this while you're at it. Can you also find out that? Can you also find out that? And it's not actually getting the actual original use case done.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of driven by the fact that you're going to print something, and so
Right.
you better get that stuff in there.
Exactly.
Because it's the only opportunity, whereas you could actually kind of add it to a web form.
Yeah, and we don't
for a
have
couple
those
months.
restrictions in the digital world. Yeah.
When we looked at the record track, even before we began the fellowship, we got an interdisciplinary team of folks to work on policy, like where are the staff right now, what do they need, what kind of training, where are the procedures, are they helpful or not helpful, are there barriers that we can remove before we design an app or a system? And it was helpful also in gaining buy-in to really ask those questions.
Yeah.
Another question, how did you break away from waterfall vendor lock-in with the web redesign? I think that's probably aimed at Jay.
Well,
That's from Chad Foley from Raleigh.
yeah, I would say the selection of the vendor was really very important. And I wouldn't say that we completely broke away and that we were doing legitimate sprints or anything in developing the website, but having the vendor be such a good partner, and knowing that we were engaging in the first launch and then we were going to have future iterations really helped us. Now, getting away from vendor lock-in, we've used the same vendor. I mean, we had the large initial contract with the vendor, and then we have an ongoing development contract with them. But for additional scope that comes up, we are open. I mean, that's why we went with Drupal, and that's why we wanted to go with an open source product.
Yeah, so if I can push you a little bit, how did you know, or did you know up front that they were going to be that kind of partner?
Well, so there was a lot of luck, but there was also a lot of communication early on. This is how we want this project to run. We didn't have it as well defined as maybe we should have for a traditional RFP, but I think we all in the RFP selection group, we had a really good feeling about them. I hate to say that we went on a good feeling, but it was, we were inspired by their take on the project.
Malcolm Gladwell would be proud of you.
Last question. One thing you would tell people who want to get started listening to their constituents on inside and outside City Hall in this way? A very quick one.
Leave City Hall. Maybe
Leave
go out
City
there.
Hall.
I think that would be a good start. Yeah. I mean, Oakland's a really fantastic city in that it is easy to go and meet people. I think, City Hall and the constituents are very close, but yeah, definitely get out there.
All right.
Make it fun and give people an opportunity to sort of unleash their creativity and think about this is going to make it easier to do your job and it's going to be easier for us to deliver service, which depending on who your audience is.
Don't wait for it to be right. Just get started. I don't really like some of the heat map that we got is a real pretty cheesy thing, but I didn't have time or resources to get people into a room and be videotaping or anything. Maybe we will. Hopefully we will. I've seen some hacks on how to get there, but just get started in some way or another.
Nice.
Build the permission and the buy-in from the people who have the purse strings and the policy chops to say it's okay to go out and talk to people. By talking about risk, if we're going to do this project without talking to people, it is like me trying to walk from here to there with a blindfold on. Do you want to take on that risk? We really need to understand the language and the values and the motivation of our colleagues within the organization. Just the way that we would try to understand users, we need to understand them. And when we understand their values and their needs, then we can design an approach and a solution that's going to work well for them. So we need to kind of pivot and use our design skills inside the organization too.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank our wonderful panel, Jess McMullen, Jay Anderson, Karen Boyd, and Francis Berriman. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.